we are back at the Bancole Ranch, and June is chilling outside, and Emily is coming around the block with Oliver. He goes to run off and play in the snow, and June greets Emily with, "We're enjoying very fine weather." And Emily says, "Pious little shit." Nice callback to season 1. There's so many of them in this episode, and it's just really delightful. And they talk about how her court day went, which was ultimately disappointing.
Yeah, but I just love that it's the two of them having this conversation because I feel like they, at least for June, like Emily is the nearest person to understand. This has always been June's person while she was in Gilead, from what we've seen. More so than Moira. We see in the flashbacks that Moira was June's person, but now it really is in Gilead, season 1 through season 4. It really was Emily on a day to day present moment for June. And so for her to unload on her in a way that we haven't seen June unload and be really pretty forthright with her feelings and her emotions and her thoughts, more so than we've ever seen her since she's been in Canada, was with Emily. So I do appreciate that they're at least showing that there is an understanding between them. And it starts right like you said in the beginning of that callback to pious little shit. And we get the Holly mention too as she's working through the fact that they talk about the Gilead justice and how this isn't how Gilead would do it. They like their justice with a personal touch, which is the first little bit of foreshadowing we see that it says Gilead is within June and she can't, for better or worse, this is how she has learned to operate. And then you get the callback to her mother as well, which we haven't seen a ton of callbacks to Holly in this season, but when we get it, it makes me so happy because we just see that June is inching closer and closer to being her mother's daughter. Essentially, this is what we're seeing, and for her to mention her mother and then throw it in about the Old Testament and pay attention to what they are buying because that is what they believe. And again, great foreshadowing because Fred believes this shit. He believes in this kind of vengeance, justice, eye for an eye bullshit. So, you know what? Great. There you go, Fred. How did you enjoy it?
Pretty much what they based Gilead on. And Emily takes up that conversation with a joke, which I appreciated. She's like, "Yeah, Old Testament, much better read." But then she says, "The righteous will rejoice in vengeance and wash their feet with the blood of the wicked." And that is Psalms 58 for our Bible curious friends. That is some hardcore retribution-ish kind of shit right there. That's the entire basis of what Gilead was founded upon. They love that shit. That's how they justify what they've done, is they are the righteous and we're rejoicing and we're washing the feet with the blood of the wicked, except the blood of the wicked is, single moms and fucking gay people and everybody else that they deemed inappropriate for society.
It also sort of gives you I took this as giving us a quick little insight to Emily's religious background as well. So anyone that's studied the Bible at all, or read the Bible, or knows of the Bible, knows that there's like different sort of translations, and that's because the original script or the original text was written in Hebrew. A lot of it was verbal tradition. So the King James version is the one that's like most often used, but then there's like the English Standard, the New Living, the New International, like all these ridiculous ones. And the closest that I could find for what Emily said, which was "the righteous will rejoice in vengeance and wash their feet in the blood of the wicked," was the Berean Study Bible, which is "the righteous will rejoice as they see they are avenged. They will wash their feet in the blood of the wicked." And the Berean Study Bible, so I'm going to rabbit hole here slightly, but there's all sorts of different ways that people interpret the Bible. There is the word for word analysis, which are the people that take everything in the Bible literally. Those are, usually the creationists. Yeah, where every single thing is taken to be literal, and then that's considered the word for word thought. And then there's the thought for thought school, which is on the opposite end of the spectrum. That's more of like dynamic. That's Swedenborgian, things of that nature, where it's like more evaluation commentary, and it's more like kind of like doing like a metaphorical swan dive into it. Which, if the three of us were religious, I kind of get the feeling that's where we would go. Anyway.
I don't know why you say that.
So the Berean, I'm probably mispronouncing it, but the Berean Bible kind of falls somewhere in the middle of that. Where it's like the literal and the literal and like the more dynamic thoughts kind of have a nice balance. So it's meant to be like, hey, like a lot of this is metaphor, some of this can be taken literally, but it's really just meant to be like a positive book. It's actually like meant to be like the most forgiving of the styles, where it's not entirely linear. And I thought that like for Emily, who is a doctor, and a woman of education, like that would make the most sense for her, that if she were going to read the Bible, that would be her vibe. Was like not taking it super literal, not going like the super literal, because she understands that this is a book of that are written by humans, but not going for like the completely dynamic like metaphorical swan dive, which is what I did. I also appreciated this because I kind of thought that this quote was the overarching theme of the episode as a whole, and probably season 4 to an effect of like, the righteous will rejoice in vengeance and wash their feet in the blood of the wicked. Like, there's something to be said for different paths of healing. And for some people, like Moira, you can acknowledge that anger but don't live in it. And June retorts with, why can't we feel that anger? We should feel that anger. Different people are going to heal from different traumas in different ways. And vengeance can be a form of healing. Revenge can be a form of healing, because is it the healthiest of mechanisms? Probably not from a psychological standpoint. However, who are we to gauge what's going to be healthiest and best for one person's trauma that we haven't endured? So it gives those people an opportunity to, like as we see with the persecution, it gives these people who have endured this awful trauma an opportunity to purge that pain from themselves and impart it onto someone else. It's not necessarily the healthiest of ways, but I can understand. But for me, that quote kind of set the backbone for how Emily and June end up coping with their trauma.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree 100%.
I love what you just did there. I totally agree. And it actually kind of like I could segue this into the article that I found, because I could piggyback this with that. So I was poking around the interwebs and I found an article on Medium. It's a December 2020 article, so several months old. It's about revenge and rape in the media, called "Do We Still Have a Place for Rape Revenge Fantasies?" And it addresses the anger and rage part of rape trauma and how it is dismissed and tone policed by everyone from our legal system to the media. And even still, after we've had like 5 years worth of the Me Too movement, roughly. No, 2017-ish, right? I feel like that's about right. Whatever. Close to that. So how we've seen that the repercussions for offenders are seriously inadequate if they are brought to justice at all. And this article was spurred by several critics' butthurt over the idea of rape revenge in the film Promising Young Woman. And I found the following passages particularly insightful and honest. It's easy to pull back from survivors' violent rage, to call it cruel or selfish, not shellfish, or to extol abstract concepts like mercy rather than deal with survivors' very concrete need to make their pain go away. Yet victims would not need revenge if they were getting justice. They would not feel angry and powerless and ready to lash out if our response were adequate to restore their dignity and make them feel safe. All these murder fantasies are demands to have the pain of rape witnessed and taken seriously. If we honor that pain, the anger itself might be unnecessary. People who are already being heard do not have to scream. The author of this article, because I definitely should mention that because I forgot to write that shit down, is Jude Ellison S. Doyle. Thank you, Ellison. Appreciated very much. I found it completely appropriate to what I was looking for in regards to this, because I think that's something that I struggle with, is that anger and rage aspect of of dealing with like abuse and victimization in your past, and how people are always telling you to take the high road, let it go, looking at you, Luke. All of these things that basically are code for you should just forget it and stop making us all uncomfortable about it.
That sounds like a fantastic article and exactly pertinent to what's happening here. People that feel heard and seen don't feel the need to scream. June and Emily don't feel like their pain is being heard. June especially does not feel like her pain is being heard. She doesn't feel seen. She doesn't feel seen by Moira, who also endured a similar pain but doesn't understand how June's processing that trauma because it's been a different manifestation. Rita sees it, but Rita is working through her own trauma. Luke can't see it and doesn't understand it, so June has no recourse but to scream at this point. I love that quote. Nice find.
It does. There's another part that I thought was really fantastic. They go on to say rage is a part of trauma. It's not the only part or even the most important part, but it occurs within every healing process. And what most people need after they've been assaulted is to regain a sense of control over their lives, which is clearly what June has been trying to do. Revenge fantasies like Promising Young Woman and, hey, now that we're current, The Handmaid's Tale, are first and foremost fantasies about taking control back from the rapist, about being able to decide what happens. For most of us, fantasies are all we ever get.
That's part of what makes it so gratifying that she and Emily and the other refugees from Gilead are able to enact their revenge, like, because we've gone on this emotional journey with them. I think that's why it's so gratifying for us to watch them turn him into a slurry and bludgeon him, because we don't get the gratification of that in our own lives for any trauma that we have. So to get to see these women, even if it is fictional, get to enact their own brand of healing through the outlet of rage is incredibly cathartic. I do love as well that we've talked before about how June and Emily sort of have a shared emotional response to their rage, and I appreciate that June is able to let her guard down with Emily more than anyone else, by saying that confiding in Emily that a good mother would be able to let go. And she says that twice. And I think that I get why she is focusing on that. Because she's focusing on that with Emily, because she understands that Emily is also having difficulty letting go. We hear Emily say that earlier in the season, that Syl is being really patient with her while she's working through this, and like while she's working through how she's going to let go. But I think both of them are being extremely unfair to themselves in this, and it's so painful to hear that they're stuck in this echo chamber with the two of them, of not being able to acknowledge that you can simultaneously be a good mother to your parent and also not be willing to let go of your trauma that has so deep seated. Like, the two are not mutually inclusive.
Mommy guilt is a powerful, powerful fucking dragon that will consume the shit out of you. So whenever I see June, I just see mommy guilt on steroids. But you're right, it's hard to just separate, yes, just because you couldn't get Hannah out doesn't mean that you're a bad mom. It doesn't make you a bad mom, and just because you can't let go doesn't make you a bad mom. I don't understand how a mother could let go. I have thought about putting myself in this particular situation so many times throughout the watching of this show. And I know, because it's who I am as a person, I go full-blown June on this. I don't feel bad about it. And how can you blame her? She is going to carry this with her she carries this with her every moment of every day of her life.
But Larry really got in her head. He's going to get in her head later in the diner scene, but this is coming off of that conversation where they had the phone conversation, which is very much like Unknown Caller back of season 3. And when she calls him, he says, "How can you be a mother? You're full of heartache and trauma." He didn't say trauma. I forget what it was, trouble or something. But I think he really got in her head here when he tells her that, because I think that's what she's second guessing, is how that's why she wants to let it go, because Larry said you can't even be a good mother. Let Hannah go. But she's also raising this other child. It's just something I had thought about when he said it, of like, yeah, that's great that like you don't think she's going to be a very good mother to Hannah because she's got to like work through some shit. And I understand at least where he's coming from there, in terms of like, yeah, I was saying the same thing throughout the whole episode. Like, she needs some help. She needs some assistance to work through all this shit. But she's raising Nicole. Like, she needs to be able to raise her. And so for him to say that, whether or not it's true is not for me to say. It's just that it sucks. It feels unfair that she feels that way. But I think that's what she's thinking of, is that he said that, and then later he's going to say it again, with the whole like, Fred justice thing, and it's not going to be enough for you. But to an extent, Larry does have her number, and I feel like she takes to heart what he says.
Absolutely, we'll agree with that. Yeah, definitely. I also found it interesting, Scarlett, that your interpretation of like a good mother would be able to let go was that she was talking about being able to let go of Hannah?
Because I feel like that's part of it. It's not just letting go of Fred. She can't continue until she can also let go of Hannah. Though it's twofold. As I'm interpreting it, it's twofold. She could let go of Fred all that she wants. She's still gonna have this baggage of Hannah lurking in the background. I feel like it's as powerful as what Fred has done to her. It's just right now Fred is paramount because this is the issue that she actually had, being the operative word, some control over, that she thought that she would be able to make some headway that could possibly even lead her to Hannah. But now they're just letting Fred go. So I just feel like she's kind of decimated at this point.
That was our first half coverage of the season 4 finale, The Wilderness. Join us back here, and we get a June and Fred showdown, and we cover we cover the back half of the most gratifying half hour of television thus far, The Wilderness.
Truth.
So, see you in 10 seconds.